Okay, so when we hear the phrase childhood trauma, our minds usually jump straight to, the big stuff, the loud arguments, the specific events that leave a mark. But today, we're going to explore a totally different kind of childhood wound, one that isn't defined by what happened to you, but actually by what never happened.
So, what if your absolute greatest strengths, the things people compliment you on the most, are actually just survival strategies? It's kind of a wild thought, right? But the material we're digging into today suggests exactly that. A lot of those traits society loves to praise us for, like being incredibly mature for your age or just fiercely independent, well, they might literally just be the adaptations of a kid who had to figure out how to need less.
We're talking about the invisible wound, and this is basically the absence of comfort. When you cried, the absence of emotional mirroring. Honestly, it's just the absence of being asked how you feel and having someone actually stick around to hear the answer. Since growing up with this kind of absence leaves zero visible scars, it is incredibly hard to pinpoint. So, what do kids do? They adapt. They build up these habits that look an awful lot like maturity, but they're really just protective armor. All right, let's jump into our first section, the illusion of independence. Here we'll be looking at habits 1 and 7, which are never asking for help and overgiving. Let's talk about the habit of never, ever asking for help. From the outside, society looks at you and sees this admirable self-sufficiency, right? You're the one who always figures it out alone. But the internal reality? It's a completely different story. When a kid learns that reaching out is consistently met with just indifference, their brain essentially calculates that asking for help equals rejection. So you aren't just being highly capable here. You're building this lonely fortress to protect yourself from the very specific pain of having a need and just watching it go completely unmet. And that actually flows right into habit 7, overgiving. Again, society sees the classic therapist friend. You know the one. The incredibly generous person who drops everything for everyone. But internally, you totally vanish the second you are in a crisis. Somewhere along the line in childhood, you learned that your value only exists when you're useful to other people. Being helpful got you warmth while having needs got you ignored. Because of that, receiving care doesn't actually feel like love to you. It feels like a trap or, a debt that you're going to have to pay back eventually. Moving on to section 2, which we're calling the apologetic existence. This covers habits 3 and 4, over-explaining and chronic apologizing. Think about habit 3 for a second, over-explaining everything. Let's say you're 5 minutes late and you launch into this 3-minute, hyper-detailed account of exactly why. Society praises this. They see it as you being conscientious, making logical choices. But the truth is, your internal reality is rooted in fear. Because your childhood environment never really respected your basic preferences, you learned to pre-defend yourself. You make sure your choices are absolutely airtight before anyone can even question them. So you're not actually explaining yourself to the person standing in front of you. You're explaining yourself to a ghost from your past who never really gave you permission to just exist. I'm sorry for needing anything. I'm sorry for being here. Just let that sink in for a moment. This is the dark underbelly of habit 4, constantly apologizing for taking up space. Apologizing when someone literally bumps into you, or apologizing because your house isn't spotless. Look, this isn't politeness. It's the internalized belief that your mere presence is an imposition. It's the voice of a kid who had to learn to shrink themselves to survive exhausted or uninterested parents. Every single unnecessary apology, it's really just a tiny echo of that devastating feeling. Okay, on to section 3, the disconnected self. We're looking at habits 2, 5, and 6 here, which are emotional numbness, shifting, and doubt. So this disconnection really shows up as habit 2, literally not knowing what you're feeling. The psychological term for this is alexithymia. It's an actual disconnect between your body's physical emotional signals and your conscious awareness of them. See, in a healthy childhood, parents act like emotional mirrors. They label a kid's feelings so the kid can figure out how to process them. But, when emotions are just ignored, that mirroring literally never happens. The kids' feelings go unnamed, so they learn to just mute their inner world entirely. And that is exactly why your mind might go completely blank when someone asks you, "Hey, how are you feeling?" Which naturally leads us right into habit 5, becoming a completely different person depending on who you happen to be with. You intuitively tweak your tone, your opinions, your whole personality to match the room. Now, society calls this being charming or having high social intelligence, but the internal reality is so much heavier than that. For someone who grew up with emotional neglect, this is actually a deeply ingrained trauma response to a profoundly unstable emotional environment at home. Basically, this shape-shifting personality is just hypervigilance wearing a costume.
It's the exhaustion of constantly monitoring the moods of the adults around you just to know if the ground is stable enough to stand on. As a kid, you had to constantly read the room to figure out if it was safe to ask for something, right? You essentially became a mirror for other people's emotions because having a solid, fixed personality of your own just wasn't safe. And all of this culminates in habit 6, chronic self-doubt. Just the agonizing, nonstop second-guessing of your own judgment. The source material points out that this stems directly from those childhood moments where your expressed feelings were routinely dismissed. You know, like when you said you were sad and an adult immediately told you, no, you're not, you're just tired. You learned that your internal compass was fundamentally unreliable, mostly because it was consistently denied by the exact people who were supposed to confirm it. All right, let's move to our final section, putting down the armor and healing the invisible wound.
Listen, if you're recognizing yourself in any of these habits today, I really want you to hear this loud and clear. There is absolutely nothing wrong with you. There never was. Your brain did exactly what it was designed to do. It adapted to keep you safe in a situation that asked entirely too much of a child. These habits, they aren't character flaws. They are highly successful survival tools. I mean, they got you here, right? But the thing is, they were built for a world and a childhood that just doesn't exist anymore.
So how exactly do we heal from an invisible wound? Well, it doesn't require some dramatic overnight transformation. Actually, it starts with these tiny, almost invisible steps. Step 1, state a preference. Instead of saying, oh, I don't care, you pick, try just saying, I prefer an Italian. Step 2, wait 5 seconds before saying sorry for something that definitely wasn't your fault. Just let that uncomfortable silence sit. And step 3, let someone help you carry something, even if you could easily manage it by yourself. You are allowed to put the armor down now. So I'm curious, which of these habits felt the closest to your own experience? Naming your armor isn't a weakness, guys. It's really the first act of finally seeing yourself the way you deserve to be seen a long, long time ago. If this explainer sparked an aha moment for you, or if you know someone who's currently carrying around this invisible weight, please share this with them. Because understanding our past is absolutely the very first step toward unburdening our future. Thanks so much for learning with me today.